Hello, this is Bill Sullivan. I'm the Vice President and General Manager for Denodo, the logical data platform company. Joining Mr. Ted Cotterill, the Chief Privacy Officer and General Counsel for Indiana's data agency and the founding Secretary and Treasurer of StateRAMP, for today's discussion on behalf of Chief Data Officer Magazine. Ted, we're honored to have you with us and excited to learn about what you're up to there in Indiana. For the benefit of those that are not familiar with StateRAMP, it started as FedRAMP. I'll just read I don't carry this around in my mind, but I'll read the definition from the GSA website. The FedRAMP is a government-wide program that provides standardized approach to security assessment, authorization, and continuous monitoring for cloud products and services. It enables agencies to use modern cloud technologies with an emphasis on security and protection of federal information and helps accelerate the adoption of secure cloud solutions. So essentially that establishes a set of standards that both government and industry must adhere to in order to operate in a cloud-based world to ensure to the greatest degree possible security of citizens' data, as well as the infrastructure, government infrastructure used to handle it. Is that a pretty fair statement of what FedRAMP is, and does that extend into StateRAMP as well?
Yeah, I think that's a fair explanation, and in the StateRAMP context. So all credit to Joe Belosky and J.R. Sloan, two of our other founding board members, along with our executive director Leah McGrath, who's fantastic and has been telling this story with her team across the country. Joe and J.R. Were having a conversation a few years ago, and when I heard the story, one of them said, "You know what we really need is a StateRAMP." Because cloud service providers that do business with the federal government, they're eligible to be FedRAMP ready or authorized. But a lot of state governments, local governmental units, public education institutions in Indiana, IU, Purdue, groups like that, if they want to do business, if they want to move to the cloud, there may be a local cloud service provider. We have a Buy Indiana preference for our state agencies, right? There may be a cloud service provider that meets that preference, and it helps in the contracting, the procurement phase for them, but that doesn't do business with the federal government. So they're not even eligible for FedRAMP. And we understand why the federal government has architected it that way. It's an internal program for them. So we set up a nonprofit StateRAMP based here in Indianapolis, coincidentally enough, that serves all state, local governmental units and the public education sector across the country. To bring first, what we focused on is NIST 853 and have just transitioned our controls to Ret 5, so that if you're moving to the cloud as one of those entities, you then have this suite of cloud service providers that have gone through our process to be ready or authorized and have that status, so that you can have confidence in not only their cyber posture today, but then they go through continuous monitoring. Because as we talked about, similarly to the expectations of citizens, technology is not standing still, and cyber risks aren't standing still. So a point in time is not going to work. You have to have continuous monitoring to really get effective governance over your cloud service provider cyber posture. So I can share more about this, but generally speaking, the idea is if the data is not on-prem anymore, you have now this, there's this obligation on you to take much more care with respect to your cloud service provider relationships, and StateRAMP makes that really easy.
That's an outstanding program. And again, for folks that are listening and thinking, well, why is this relevant? The goal here really is to protect the United States critical infrastructure from bad actors internationally, right? And that's the highest goal, is to ensure the integrity of the technology that's being used to manage citizen data across the country is being treated in a uniform fashion that we can manage, such that it is not easily exploited by bad actors. Is that fair?
That's right. Yeah, and if you think about things like Colonial Pipeline, when a breach like that happens, that then forces a functional response, that pipeline owner, we're going to shut it down now. This is I hear Joe talk about this a lot. Our way of life is at stake here.
Yeah.
So we have to treat cyber very seriously. But it doesn't have to, in government, we're always expected to do more with less.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to bury us in all kinds of new work. We have programs like StateRAMP that enable us to manage it really efficiently.
Right. Now, have you had participation from private sector critical infrastructure folks? Like you mentioned, the pipelines. I can also think of rail, trucking, power generation, transportation, that kind of thing. Have they reached out, or any of the logistics providers?
I'd have to defer to our executive director based on whatever conversation she's having at any given time. But I think what I can say is the response has been amazing. We've had in Texas, they codified the idea of a ramp, and in the administrative rules that accompany it, it specifically mentions that StateRAMP there's an adequacy determination there, that StateRAMP works to participate in the TexRAMP program. In Arizona, they have adopted it across the board. So they had an ASRAMP program, and now they're transitioning that in large part to StateRAMP. So we've had a lot of states jump on, a lot of local governments that we have conversations with. Then we'll get to those, I think, the more nuanced kind of districts. So you think of even a library district or a sewer district, or school
Water
district,
yeah, school
water
district.
district.
Yeah.
And utility providers. I think the opportunity here from a StateRAMP perspective is endless, because we have so many levels of government in the United States.
Yeah.
But I just think at this point it's become a necessity.
Perfect. So two questions first on this topic. First, if another state or government entity wanted to learn more, reach out to your office. Is there some place you want them to communicate with?
I think stateramp.org is the place to start. You can certainly reach out to me if you already have my contact information, but I will get you in touch with the right folks that are best positioned to answer your questions.
Perfect. And thank you. And then the second thing, for any private sector, providers, technology providers, systems integrators, manufacturers that want to participate in this, same things, go to the StateRAMP website.
Yeah, stateramp.org. Absolutely.
Yeah. And you do have participation from commercial entities in the program. Obviously, anybody that wants to participate has to conform with the StateRAMP certification. I assume that's very similar to the federal.
It's similar to federal. We've tried to so while we maintain the same cyber bar, right, a high bar there, we want to lower the barrier to entry from a financial perspective, realizing, as I mentioned, some of these might be more of, I use the term mom and pop, a smaller cloud service provider that maybe is leveraging an AWS or an Azure to platform something, but they've got some touch points to the data in between. And we're concerned about all of those. We need to know about our cyber supply chain, right? All of those links in the chain. So yes, if they're going through the program, again, a very high bar with respect to the cyber standard, but we want to make it easy for them to participate.
Yeah. Ted, our conversation prompted me to ask, if a vendor already has FedRAMP certification, how, if at all, does that play into their ability to be StateRAMP certified?
Yeah, thanks, Bill. So we have a fast track process that we've set up at StateRAMP, recognizing that FedRAMP has a very high bar, right? And we respect their standards that they impose on cloud service providers as they go through this process. That fast track process enables them essentially to come into the back door of StateRAMP and shorten that time to receive a StateRAMP authorized or ready status to something like 6 weeks. We'll be able to check with our StateRAMP folks to confirm the timeline, but it shrinks that time investment for the cloud service provider, recognizing that they already have this standard through FedRAMP that we respect. Another thing that I'd mention while we're on the topic is this idea that a big part of the value add for the cloud service providers that are listening of StateRAMP is this idea of verify once, use many. So The same thing that you get with FedRAMP, for those of you that haven't, and for those of you that aren't doing business with the federal government, if you go through the StateRAMP process, you receive that ready or authorized recognition, that status. Then you've done that once for this client that has asked you to go through the process. You get to then recycle that status with all of your government clients. So fast track, verify once, use many. And lastly, I'd mentioned this idea of security snapshot. So if you're in the example that I give folks is maybe you're in a competitive procurement process, it's not an RFP, it's something a little lighter, and your investment in that in the initial procurement to win the bid, it needs to be a little lower. You can go through our security snapshot process, which is very streamlined, and it gives you a point in time cybersecurity perspective to be able to submit with your bid to the government, to the potential government client. And from where I sit, if one vendor does that, you've just separated yourself from the other 2, 3, 4, or 5, because now I've got this confidence in your cyber posture that I don't have in the other. So there's a lot of StateRAMP continues to work to iterate and to find places to add value, but this idea of a platform that's bringing some uniformity to the way that we procure cloud is I think a big win for government clients.
That's excellent points. 2 quick questions. First, can a vendor take advantage of a StateRAMP certified environment? So I'm sure Microsoft Azure, being active in Indiana, is StateRAMP certified. Is that a correct assumption?
A vendor can take advantage of so if they're leveraging Azure, and Azure has gone through that process and has received the recognition from StateRAMP, certainly another vendor can leverage it. The thing that we'll be interested to know is, where does that vendor have touch points maybe with their system or if there's another cloud service provider involved? It's the cyber supply chain, right? We want to ensure that every link in that chain is protected.
Right. Right. And then the second question is, if a manufacturer has attained FedRAMP compliance as a result of their federal business, is that transferable then to StateRAMP? How many steps would they have to take in order to achieve StateRAMP certification, do you think?
Yeah, that's the fast track process.
That is a fast track. Okay.
We've worked with FedRAMP on that to ensure that all of the investment that they've already made in their FedRAMP authorization, which is significant, gives them this sort of they get in the fast lane with StateRAMP, and I think it's about a 6-week process.
Yeah. Okay, good. I mean, and the reason that's important, Ted, is there may be federal technology providers that are looking at the state government market and it's a way to extend their market reach, and they've already made the investment in FedRAMP. So where can we take this technology to make it valuable in an adjacent market? And of course, from the state side, having more technology available to them that is FedRAMP certified and then StateRAMP certified is nothing but valuable, right? It gives you much more options at the state level.
Yeah, for those federal providers, I gave a talk recently with our StateRAMP executive director at a FedRAMP summit. And I said, we're in Washington, D.C., and said something like, I realize that we're in the lion's den here. We're in the shadow of the federal government. I'm here from a state government and representing StateRAMP. And what I can tell you, at least in Indiana, we have something like 3,000 units of local government. And where, from a state government perspective, okay, you've got 50 plus territories in the district. There's a lot of cyber proficiency in state governments. So it's much more about procurement efficiency, right? How do we make the process easier? And StateRAMP adds a lot of value there. But there is an untapped market, both at the state level from these federal providers and in all of these units of local government that also are probably more likely to lack the cyber proficiency just due to low staffing, potentially lack of resources. So they get involved in the StateRAMP process. It's set up as a 501c6 member organization. Part of our charge is to educate and to be the rising tide that lifts all boats in cyber. But also gives those cloud service providers, it unlocks this huge potential group of new clients.
Got it. The federal government always does look at the state governments as I say earlier, the laboratory of democracy, but how we leverage technology across the two separate and distinct markets is key. And your mission has enabled that and able to do it more securely. It's never going to be 100% given the changing world, but much more securely. And from a vendor perspective, it's a great way. If we've already invested $500,000 to $1 million becoming FedRAMP certified, if I've got something that allows me to be more competitive in an adjacent market, that's great value to the vendor. So may or may not have been something you thought about, but on behalf of the private sector, thank you. That's it could be valuable.
We've got a tremendous board and just a fantastic steering committee that during the COVID pandemic really came together to put all this together. So all credit to the group on this.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate your time today, Ted.
All right. You too, Bill. Thank you.
Thank you.